This is Poppy Playtime, one of the biggest horror games right now, and since Chapter 5 recently came out, instead of actually buying it, I'll try to make it myself, but in Scratch. A game engine usually meant for teaching kids how to move a cat across the screen. This is a terrible idea, and I honestly don't care, so let's just start by creating a new project. Hold on a second. Poppy Playtime is a 3D game, and Scratch only supports 2D, so am I just going to make a generic platformer with Huggy Wuggy? Well, no. I'm going to use something called raycasting, and since I have absolutely no idea on how to do that, I'm going to use the help of Grabpack. Thank you, Grabpack. So the first thing we need to do is make a simple level. We are going to change this later, but this is just so that we have something to work with. Next I added a player with a moving script, but he can go straight through walls. So just give me a second. Alright, so now we also have working collisions. Perfect. Which means it's time to actually explain how all of this will work. Basically, the player shoots out these lines called rays in this kind of cone shape, and they measure how far away the walls are. This is actually how some of the 3D levels in Geometry Dash were made. Pretty cool, right? Anyways, let's just duplicate the player, make it move until they touch a wall, and bam! We have a bunch of rays in our level. So now that we're done with that, let's actually use all of this to make a 3D looking image using the goated pen tool. And after a bit of coding, we have a 3D level, but when we get close to a wall, it gets kind of distorted. So let's just fix that real quick and... Alright, the walls are looking straight, and with some shading and background, it looks pretty awesome. However, there is one small issue. Our level sucks, so let's just change it up a bit. So now that that's done, our 3D engine is complete, which means that we can start making arguably the most iconic feature in Poppy Playtime, the Grabpack. But since this isn't an actual 3D game with a 3D environment, I decided that it will just be an animation. Now don't worry, I am going to add a scanner later on in the video, but for now I just went straight into coding and it did work, but it looked awful. So let's just fix this by making a proper model. First I started making the blue hand and this yellow thing, I don't really know what to call it, and with some texturing and shading, it looked pretty good. And after some recoloring, we also have a red hand now, so that's cool. Now we just add this in the game and why is it not working? Alright, basically what was happening is I was using the pen tool to create this sort of line thing that is supposed to be over here. But since the raycaster was also using the pen tool, it kind of messed it up. So after having to recode the entire Grabpack, it was working fine, I guess. And now our game is coming up pretty nicely. But there's no actual enemy in the game yet. And I decided that it will be Huggy Wuggy. So let's move on to the entities. First, let's add a little square over here, make some scripts that determine its position, and make a pen sprite that will make the entity appear in the level. And after some coding, he is now in our level. But we can see him through walls, which is not really meant to happen. So I had to basically redo almost all of the code that draws the level and make a depth sorting algorithm. And it did fix the bug, however, Huggy is just a circle right now, which is not really scary. So I started modeling this guy, and after a while of work, I was pretty happy with the way he turned out. So let's just add this to the game and whoa, he's already looking pretty terrifying. However, he's just standing there right now. So I made him move in the direction towards the player, which means he can actually chase you now. And when you get a little too close, you're just cooked, my friend. Now, I didn't really want to add a jump scare so that the Scratch team doesn't immediately ban my game, so I just made a simple game over screen that just stops the project. Brilliant. However, you can't really win the game right now, so I thought it's about time to make an objective. And I like the idea of the player needing to collect a certain amount of collectibles to win. And since this is Poppy Playtime, I chose that you will need to find all the VHS tapes scattered across the level. So let's just duplicate the entity sprite and start making the model. Yet again, this took me a while to make, but I think they look pretty nice. Wait, what does this text over here say? Subscribe to Simon Lemon? Oh yeah, if you are enjoying the video thus far, please consider subscribing. It's completely free, only takes you like 5 seconds and it really helps me a lot. Thanks. Now back to the video. I decided to spawn like 10 of the VHS tapes at a random position every time you start the game, and when you get close to it, nothing happens. So I made the VHS tapes disappear and changed this VHS tape variable by 1. And while I'm playing this, I'm actually pretty surprised that something like this is even possible in Scratch. However, this is the time when we came across our first big issue. Whenever you would start the game, it would just crash immediately. And after spending hours looking at my code to find any mistakes, I found nothing. And it went to the point where I even wanted to quit this challenge. So I decided that I would just take a break. And after looking more carefully at the code, I realized that in one of the sprites, instead of a stop this script block, there was a stop all block, which made the game stop immediately. So after sitting there like an absolute idiot, I fixed it and it was once again working how it should. But during testing, I noticed that the walls were looking kind of bland and boring right now. So it's time to add textures. And after adding these very long scripts and some assets, we finally had textures in our game. I don't actually understand how any of this works, but it looks pretty dope. And now, it's time for the final Poppy Playtime mechanic that I wanted to add. The hand scanner. And more specifically, the blue hand scanner. First, I made the models for the scanner. Next, I duplicated the collectible sprite, changed up some code, and when you collected all 10 VHS tapes, you can use your blue hand on the scanner, which will start scanning the hand and result in you winning the game. I didn't really want to make some kind of special win screen, so I just did the same thing as for the game over screen. Next up, I just added some small details like making it possible to move around with a cursor, which is much better than using the arrow keys, or this counter which shows you how many VHS tapes are left. Also, I thought it would be nice to add a main menu. And of course, I started with modeling. Yet again. First I made this background, which was actually pretty hard since there are many things going on in there, and to my surprise, it looked pretty nice. The next thing I made is the Poppy Playtime logo, and instead of just downloading it from Google and importing it to the game, I recreated it myself in the Scratch editor. The last thing I made was the button, which was fairly simple because it's literally just a box with some text. And after I had all the costumes done, I just made them appear on screen using clones, and made the button start the game. While I was at it, I also created a thumbnail for the game, which right now you just need to press a button over here, which I'm pretty sure is a new feature in Scratch. And at this point you might think that our game is finished and ready to release. However, you are very wrong, because there was still no sound in the game, and sound is one of the key factors to making a game scary. So I went straight into my old friend Pixabay and searched for some cool sound effects and ambience. And after implementing all of it to the project, it made such a huge difference. Finally, there's one last thing to do. First, I packaged the game using Turbo or Packager, then uploaded it to GameJolt, filled out the page, and finally hit publish. Which means, it's time for what all of you have been waiting for, the end result.